Serious true alien encounter stories. Redditor 24. The time my dad and I both had the same dream on the same night a few years ago. Basically, I vividly dreamt that the two of us were in a field of high grass, and I pointed at the sky and said, "Wow, look at that shooting star." Then the low clouds parted and a huge unevenly shaped ship with lights came down right above us, and that's all I remember. I casually brought it up a few days later that I had a weird dream, and he just looked at my mouth agape. Before I finished, he described me pointing at the sky, the clouds parting, and what the ship looked like. I know I definitely wasn't misremembering because I'd been thinking about it a lot since it happened, and there's no way you can just bullshit something like that without even knowing. It really freaked us the duck out. I posted about it to our UFOs a while ago and someone suggested that we were abducted and remembered it as a dream, which is ridiculous, but I don't even know what to think of the whole experience. What a roller coaster. Redditor 25. I used to live next to the beach in an apartment complex. One night I was with my friend looking at the ocean from the balcony. We couldn't see much as it was dark, but the light from the moon was enough for us to watch the waves on the shore. After a while my friend tell me it was so dark that if I stand up over there the only thing she could see are my teeth, and we started laughing. Seconds later we see a light on the ocean. It slowly came out of the water. What we saw was like a orb-shaped ball of light. It lighted so hard for a moment that I almost couldn't see it. It kept going up slowly and it suddenly flied fast to the sky at light speed, disappearing in the dark sky. Everything happens in like 8 seconds. We both were freak out and went inside the apartment. My mother and brother didn't believe us as expected. It was a scary but incredible experience. Years later I saw a report on National Geographic about orb-shaped lights flying around forest in USA. I knew it was the same thing I saw. Redditor 26. This was 2012 or 2013. My ex and I were driving down a remote highway in rural West Tennessee late one night. I was in the passenger seat. It was a very open area, no trees, and surrounded on both sides by flat fields. I'm looking out the window to my right and see this thing traverse the sky. It was a blue light, an artificial looking blue. Think the color of the lights on a cop car, but a little darker. It blinked with an even rhythm 3 or 4 times. The thing that stunned me was how fast it was moving. It was low to the horizon and it moved from the area of horizon in front of us to the area of the horizon behind us in about 3-5 seconds. I wasn't able to estimate size or closeness to Earth because of how fast it happened, but it was big. I've seen shooting stars that were close to Earth, and this was definitely not what that was. My ex saw it too and it freaked us both out. Redditor 27. When I was in elementary school, about 9-11 years old I think. I'm pretty bad with long periods of time. I was playing hide and seek in the dark with my little sisters and my neighbors in the yard next to my house, which belonged to my friend C. Our parents were chatting with one another on the porch of my house. While we were playing I kept looking at the sky because it was a clear night and I've always loved to look at the stars. Out of nowhere I see this big black circle block out the stars. It was completely black, like a silhouette, but it had white lights on it that rotated as it moved across the sky. It started in the north and moved south, flying very low, around 50 feet up I believe, and its passage was completely silent. We all noticed it and were staring up at the sky just as silently as the UFO. The strange thing was that I didn't feel frightened, or nervous, or anything at all. I just watched it. It passed over us and then over my house, looking as if it would touch the roof if it went any lower. As it passed over my house the lights disappeared and then reappeared as it rotated, making the thing seem to have some measure of thickness to it. The lights seemed to be on the sides of it instead of on the bottom. After it passed we immediately asked each other if we had seen it and tried to figure out what it was. Our friend Z, who was a few years older, tried to suggest that it was geese. At my questioning how did they glow? Why were they flying in circles and moving? He expanded his explanation to include that the geese were phosphorescent and moved in circles for some weird reason. The rest of us thought that it was a flying saucer because that's what it looked like, and what kid wouldn't want to see one? When I went home with my little sisters our parents were still chatting on the porch. They hadn't seen what we had, and we never told them about it for a reason I still can't figure out. It just seemed like it wasn't something important. It was strange, but just not something worth telling to your parents. We went inside and went to bed as we always did, and none of us mentioned it until a few months ago when I asked my little sister if she remembered it. She did. Redditor 28, found a crop circle in a field when I was a kid. This would have been the very early 80s. I lived in an apartment complex and there was this huge field next to my building where all of us kids played. One day my friends and I went out to the field and there was this big circle of broken and scorched grass weeds, maybe 40 feet across. We all just stood there staring at each other for a good amount of time, then we ran and told our parents, who dismissed it as childhood imagination. Redditor 29, it was 2008, my family and I were stargazing at our hotel swimming pool around 12:30 a.m. in Arizona. After about half an hour of stargazing, a giant ball of fire shot from out of nowhere in the desert sky and then disappeared after about 4 seconds. It was incredibly bright, very close to where we were sitting, made zero noise, and soared slowly through the sky without curving its path in any way. My entire family saw it. The next day we watched the local news, Googled, and asked people of nearby towns if a meteor had hit. Everyone looked confused and said no. To this day my family and I have no idea what it was. It's a silly story, so we haven't told anyone. If people might know what it was, please message me. Redditor 30, when my dad was a kid, he would lose time, wouldn't be able to remember anything that happened for days at a time, etc. One time he was in his house in Birmingham, England, and the next thing he knew he woke up in Ireland, no money, no passport, in some weird motel a week later. No memory at all of what happened or how he got there, and everyone in the motel had no idea who he was or how he got there either. He also used to suffer migraines all the time and other stuff, but I can't remember the list. Anyway, he had these pains his whole life, and he was born premature and had severe health issues, so he didn't question it much. Except for one day when he went to the dentist in Germany. His dentist pulled something small and mechanical looking out that was wedged between his tooth and gum, and as they were looking at it, it self-destructed. It was really small, so there was no harm, but ever since then, he stopped having sleep paralysis, migraines, weird nightmares, and no more blank moments in time when he couldn't remember what happened to him. While I do believe in aliens, I am quite a skeptical person and would usually find this really hard to believe, except for the fact that my dad has this huge issue with lying, can't do it to save his life, and won't do it. He has even nearly lost jobs because he is too honest. Don't know if this a history with aliens, but it's the best idea we've got. There's other experiences he has had which he hasn't told me about yet. Redditor 31, I've seen many strange and unexplained lights in the sky. However, I lived near a military base at the time, so I don't know how legit they are. Still technically UFOs though. I had been driving down an empty road out in the country when a bright orange light flashed across the horizon. It looked like a single orange diamond, which multiplied as it streaked horizontally, then merged into one again at the end, then disappeared. I pulled over and saw about 20 small pinpoints of light flying around the entire sky. They were about the size of stars and were kind of circling in all directions, and were too small to capture on my phone's shitty camera. Suddenly on top of me in the sky, two bigger, brighter lights started descending in opposite directions, then one of them made a turn on a dime to chase the other one. It accelerated so fast I could hear it, like a jet. Eventually they flew out of sight and all the lights just kinda faded out. I saw the strange diamond light one more time too. Never seen anything like it since. Happened less than a year ago. Redditor 32, there's a lot of folks in here that feel fear with regard to UFOs, but I feel something very different. I feel inspired. UFOs are proof of concept. Once we know that such technology is possible, it is only a matter of time before we will be able to duplicate it. Universe, we are coming, and we have our own AL probes. Redditor 33, not my story but my history teacher's. He claims that one day he was washing dishes with his mom and saw sparks coming from the roof. He checked on it and they saw a giant saucer over their house. And then it zoomed away really fast. Nobody really believed his story, but he swears it is true. Redditor 34, roughly 16 years ago, myself, my friend and his girlfriend at the time went to the lake to smoke a joint and hang out on a nice summer evening. This was in St. Catharines, Ontario. On the shores of Lake Ontario, as it started to get dark, we noticed a weird light in the sky that appeared to be dancing. We rationalized this as being a plane and our eyes playing tricks on us, especially since it was towards Toronto and Pearson Airport. After a bit of watching, though, another light appeared slightly above the first light and to the right that moved in the exact same pattern, and they never changed how far apart they were around this time. An elderly couple out for a walk approached us and asked if we were watching the strange lights, to which we replied yes. They remarked how odd they looked, told us to have a good night, and continued on their way. By now we've been watching for about an hour and the lights are getting closer but still quite far over the lake. All of a sudden both lights dive towards the lake and disappear. Thinking that was it, we get ready to leave when one of the lights reappears in the sky only even closer. A few minutes later the second light reappears in the exact same spot relative to the first light. They are still dancing in a synchronized pattern. Again they dive towards the lake and disappear. This repeats numerous times over the course of another hour, each time getting closer and closer. They are bright white lights up until this point, much brighter than the lights we see on the planes taking off and landing at towards Pearson Airport. Eventually only one light reappears, and it is no longer a bright white light, but is a combination of blue, purple and red spinning lights. It is now much lower and coming towards us very quickly, not just like we were in its path, but that it was coming exactly for us. This freaks my friend's girlfriend out and she says we have to go now. So we laugh at her for being scared yet make no attempt to try and get her to stay. I wasn't terrified, but I had like a nervous fear that I tried not to let show. I'm not exactly sure what we saw, but I know what it wasn't. On clear nights you can see planes flying over the lake, either arriving or departing from Toronto. This was not that those planes also don't dive bomb into Lake Ontario at extreme speeds. They do not have spinning lights, nor are their lights as bright as these lights were. Not long after this incident I searched online and found several reports of similar sightings from roughly the same time and location. I reported this sighting with either MUFON or something similar online. I can't remember exactly. I will try and find my original report if I can, or the ones that were similar. In total we probably watched these lights for about 3-4 hours. We've gone back to try and see the lights again, but I have never seen anything like it again. Edit. I can't seem to find my report or the similar ones from that time. Maybe the site no longer exists. Most sightings over Lake Ontario are of bright orange lights that are most likely flares. The closest reports to what I saw seem to come from a book about sightings in the 1970s. Here's a link for anyone interested. Redditor 35. Oh, I must have been 15 at the time. I was living far up north in Wisconsin and I believe it to be about November or January. I was sitting in the snow waiting for the deer to come through this trail. After a few hours, when the sun is first starting to get low, I get my deer and track it maybe a half mile from when I had shot it. About halfway though gutting the deer, everything got extremely bright like I had been on the sun, and I was completely blinded at this point. The only thing I remember was something that looked like olives before waking up in pitch darkness around 3 a.m. with the deer carcass missing. Redditor 36. One night I was sitting in my backyard, smoking and watching the stars, when all of a sudden an object appeared. It looked like a 3D diamond. It made no sound. It looked like it had mirrors on it, or it might have been transparent, kind of like Predator. I could make out the shape of it, but I immediately froze. It hovered for a couple of seconds before slowly flying by. I did feel like I was being watched, or like there was someone inside looking at me, if that makes sense. I never understood how there isn't better quality UFO videos until I saw that. I was so engrossed by it that getting my phone out to record was the last thing on my mind. Redditor 37. Maybe this doesn't really answer the question, but what if a human being or more have a real contact but they cannot speak about it? For obvious reasons, no one would believe. Like really had a talk, both human and alien saw each other. Thinking about aliens and space can be frightening, but it's so fascinating. Redditor 38. This gives me chills to this day. The most chilling part is that I wasn't alone in the experience. Probably shouldn't have waited till the middle of the night to write it out, but here goes. When I was about 12, my best friends and I used to sleep out on my friend's trampoline in his yard. We would gather our bed stuff and bounce around till we got tired, then eventually lay down and go to sleep. We all lived out in the country in Ohio, so the night sky was always awesome to check out while we talked and dozed off. We had campouts like this during summer break for years. One particular evening, it was my two best friends and I, Kyle, Brandon was Kyle's cousin and another friend of ours, Jeremy, and after winding down we're laying there talking when we noticed that there's something floating over the woods nearby. You couldn't see it directly, just that it blocked the stars out as it slowly moved. It was just a little higher than the tree tips tops, and completely silent. We were just some dumb kids, so we just watched it. Slowly it drifted until it was directly over top of us. Then suddenly there was this light that I cannot describe. More than blindingly bright. Disorientingly, cripplingly bright. Like it shone down into you. The next thing I remember, we were all standing inside Kyle's house looking out his sliding glass back door at it still hovering there, and then it glides off. We were all spooked for sure, but we decided to go back out to go to bed on the trampoline. We're laying there for a while and the next thing we know, it comes back again and does the exact same thing. Again, we find ourselves inside looking out the back door. Beyond all reason, we go back outside to bed again, same thing happens again. Then we finally say screw it and sleep inside with the lights on. Kyle moved away to Florida that summer, and we lost touch. Kyle didn't live there anymore, so Brandon stopped coming around, and I was never really close with Jeremy. So that was that for several years. Then when I was 18 I heard he was in town staying with family. I ran into him at a party one night, and pulled him to the side to ask him about it as it had bothered me for some time. His response has shaken me to this day. I cannot describe his reaction sufficiently. He looked at the ground and said, "I don't want to talk about it." I was kinda shocked by his response, so I didn't know what to say. He got up and walked out and I stayed sitting there thinking about what just happened. I got up after a minute to go see if I could find him, but he'd left immediately after. That was it. Haven't seen him or Brandon or Jeremy since. But his response was enough to let me know something strange definitely went down that night. I don't know if I want to remember. Redditor39, hi Reddit. Made an account just to share my story. Forgive my formatting, first time poster. When I was about 8 years old my family and I lived in upstate New York. Near Albany. Even when I was young sleep did not come easy to me. Anyway, I'm about 8 and fast asleep when I feel that something is amiss feeling and open my eyes. I look at the clock and it's about 2:30 a.m. All of a sudden I hear a deafening noise. To quote Large Marge, like a garbage truck falling from the Empire State Building. Immediately after the noise I see lights filtering through my window. They were low at first, but became increasingly brighter to the point I had to close my eyes. My 8-year-old self knew something was up, so I pulled my covers over my head, ultimate defense at that age. Before I knew it, the light had dimmed and I pulled the covers back. It was now 5:30 a.m. and I knew my dad was up getting ready for work. I ran to his room and pounded on his door. I described what happened. He dismissed it thinking I just had a dream. Well, for almost a year following that account I would have visitors every morning. I would wake up unable to move, surrounded in my bed by 6 tall figures in gray cloaks with brown skin. They would communicate with me and tell me not to be scared, they just needed to watch me. Once their paralysis was lifted I would fly out of my bed and run downstairs. I got to the point where I hated going to bed. This happened for a year. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. Kind of like, why me? Thinking. There are plenty of other kids much cooler than I am, why pick me? When it finally stopped I was elated. However, every now and then I still feel like someone is watching me. I did consider what I was going through, sleep paralysis, but the more I read about it, I can tell you it most definitely was not that. Also, I did tell my parents and they just thought I was making it up. Thanks for reading. Redditor40, so this happened back in around 90 or 91. I was in the 3rd grade at the time. I was at my dad's house for the weekend. It must have been a Saturday night and I was sitting on the floor with my dad behind me on the couch watching some Charlie Brown movie or another. When all of a sudden the room goes weird and foggy and I look over at the door leading to the rest of the house and there is this little gray ducker peeking around the door at me. One of the weirdest things was how not freaked out I was. I just got up calm as could be and walked over to it. We locked eyes the whole way. Upon coming within a few feet of it, all of a sudden the fog was gone and I found myself back on the floor watching TV. I immediately jumped up and ran back to where it was, but there was only a disappearing trace of some glittering smoke falling to the ground. The following Monday I told my friends about it. I had described it as it looked kinda like E.T., but gray with big black eyes. I didn't get much of a reception with the story, so I just stopped talking about it. Eventually I convinced myself it was just my overactive imagination or something. Fast forward a few years, I'm in 6th grade. New school, new building, new people. Get invited by some kids to go to the local mall with them. Everyone is having fun until we go into the Spencer's Gifts. In the back thumbing through the posters when all of a sudden I find one with this creepy mother ducker out of my childhood. Then I started seeing their likenesses everywhere. Had a 311 CD that I seriously couldn't even look at the case because it had a drawing of gray on them. I've looked into any possibility I would have saw an image of a gray prior to 1991. There are a few certainly. But none that I can reasonably expect to have encountered as a child living in the Appalachian foothills back then. There's been other things since then. But that was the most in-your-face fucking bizarre one. I've even heard the idea that our brains invent most of our childhood memories. But again I had already considered that idea and accepted it, only to have it all come crashing back when I saw that poster in the mall. Really I just try not to think about the implications too much these days, and really just dust off the story for parties if the conversation drifts that way. Which is so much better than being unable to sleep without a light on. Yeah, slept in the dark as a kid, until that night. Then it took a few years to get over my fear of the dark. Then I see the fucking poster. Couldn't sleep without a light on nearby again until my 20s. Pictures of gray still make me uneasy, and while part of me says if I ever were to see another one I'd probably lash out at it in some visceral deep-rooted fear and loathing. I know that I won't. I would just stand there unmoving, unthinking, and happily eager. I mean I wasn't even able to be afraid. Freaky shit. Redditor 41, apologies for the long story but I promise it is worth it. While I can't for certain say this was an alien encounter, I am 99% sure it was, and I believe most people would provided the circumstantial evidence I was provided. First, a bit of background. I'm a military school teacher in Nebraska, and one year we had a man from out of town come and take a position as a teacher. He was allegedly a Gulf War veteran and a doctor. I'll just call him Dr. Smith. Now in a military school, in addition to many of the same classes you'd have in regular schooling, we also run drills like marching, rifle cleaning, mess clean, tending to the grounds, etc. Thus, making his credentials extraordinary, our school rarely gets out-of-towners to apply, and almost none with Dr. Smith's experience. Since we're an on-facility school, meaning the students only go home for certain holidays or emergencies and the staff live on school property, many of the staff bring their significant others to live there during the school year. This man also brought what we initially believed to be his wife, but their relationship seemed to be more of a professor-intern type. Nobody really saw her much, but my friends would sometimes recall strange sightings where they'd see her duck off into a nearby cornfield at weird hours of the night. So the extraterrestrial part of the story kicks in now. So about a month or two into the school year and everything's normal. Dr. Smith is a competent teacher and great at leading some of the military exercises we run, and he was a nice guy, if not a little odd. He was always mentioning a great war while looking slightly confused as to what he was talking about. I just chalked it up to some form of PTSD. One day I'm overseeing the pupils tending to the cornfield, one of their non-traditional school duties, when Dr. Smith's companion appears out of nowhere from the field and comes up to me and starts asking very nervously, "What are you doing? How far into the field are you going? Have you seen Mr. Smith?" I'm a bit taken aback because prior to this encounter I had only ever exchanged small heckos with this woman. I explain that my students are performing their duties and she just says one word, "Caution," and then runs off. I was more baffled by the fact that she was running everywhere, but I shrugged it and went back to overseeing the kids. A week later I wake in the middle of the night to our school alarm. We have unannounced combat drills quite a bit, but usually the staff are pre-warned. I figured it was a troubled student performing a prank, but I jumped into action nonetheless. As I met up with other teachers, it's becoming clear that this might not be a drill or a prank at all. Nobody knows who pulled the alarm until Dr. Smith's companion comes running, and always running, and yells that we need to prepare the students for an invasion. Of course we are all pissed that this crazy woman woke us all up, but she points to some scarecrows coming out of the cornfield. We realize that some of the students or some local kids must be playing a prank. So our principal goes out and tells the scarecrows to duck off and that they were on private property. They just all shout they want Dr. Smith and they wouldn't harm us if we handed him to them. Now Dr. Smith was with us and claimed to have no idea what these people were or wanted. His companion keeps pleading with him that we need to get you back, we need to get you back, you need to trust me. Then before I could hear any more of their conversation, all heck broke loose. Our principal rips off the bag from the head of the scarecrow leader and it's just hay. Then a little confused he grabs its arm and realizes it's all hay too and rips it off. Probably a midget hiding in the void? Nope. He takes apart the whole scarecrow that we just watched walk out of a field and speak, and all he could find was hay and cloth. Now everyone's starting to get confused, and one of the other teachers quietly suggests that we should assemble the students for conflict. I'm still skeptical until one of the other scarecrows walks over, puts his hand on the neck of our principal, and kills him. Everyone starts freaking out, and in the chaos of us prepping for a fight, Dr. Smith and his companion sneak into the field without the scarecrows noticing. They keep repeating to hand over Dr. Smith and we won't have any further harm done to us. Amongst all the scrambling we see a giant light in the middle of the cornfield shoot up into the sky for about 10 seconds and then disappear completely. I've tried to explain this many ways and can't. I went to the spot later on and didn't find any signs of lights or even damaged crops. The scarecrows all start to head toward the light when Dr. Smith appears from the complete other end of the cornfield. Many people will say he just ran there, but there was no way he and his companion could get from where he entered to where he exited that fast, and without damaging any of the crops. Have you ever ran through corn? Leaves an indication. Only it wasn't quite Dr. Smith. I mean, it looked like him, but something was different. He shined a small blue light. It looked like one of those keychain LED lights, but I was far away, and the scarecrows all dropped. He turned to us and said that there wouldn't be any more trouble and that he was so sorry for the loss of our colleague and that he never meant to put us in any danger. He ran off into the cornfield again, always running, and none of us ever saw him again. We were still all too panicked and busy running the students into position to truly process the sheer weirdness to what just happened. Now in the hours that followed I was ready to believe most reasonable explanations, and aliens wasn't reasonable in my book. It wasn't until morning when soldiers in uniform arrived claiming they were from a UN task force but not in any UN uniforms I had ever seen before, and asked us questions that I started putting the pieces together. They asked about things like, did you see anything unusual in the sky prior and following Dr. Smith's arrival? Were there any words he mentioned that you didn't recognize? I said yes. He was the science teacher after all, lol. What was his companion like? Did you ever hear anything about his past? Did he always look the same or did his appearance ever change? Random shit like that. Real Men in Black type shit. I half expected to be brainwashed. But they just relocated all of the teachers to other schools and had us sign confidentiality agreements. Redditor 42, late to this party but figure this is worth posting. Was woken up in the middle of the night by a deafening roar, like a Harrier jump jet was literally landing on our roof. My wife and I lay in bed for a few moments trying to figure out WTF it was, as it was so weird. After a few minutes it continued, so I got up and went outside to see what was up. What I saw was a weird shape with a red light zipping around in the sky being chased by 3 jet fighters. The red light was basically moving at incredible speed and performing some insane maneuvers, like right-angled turns and such. The jet fighters didn't really stand a chance of intercepting, but they tried, bless them. Anyhow, this went on over a town and was witnessed by thousands of people. What is weird is that no one got any photos or vids, including me.